All right, guys, I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Ariel Stern. He is the co-founder and CEO of Ayyeka, and he is going to talk to us a little bit about digitization, the IoT. We're going to talk about some cybersecurity, so we're going to mix it up today with some timely topics. Thank you so much for joining us, Ariel. We really appreciate your time today.
Sure, happy to be here.
So why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to Ayyeka?
Yes, like everything in life, it was by accident, almost by accident. So my professional career started in the defense industry. It's something like about 10 years in the defense business. And then I had like a short visit to the infrastructure space. I was actually in the project management business for transportation projects, big tunnels. And then it struck me that, I came from the defense industry. It's like science fiction, a lot of technology. I'm an engineer in background, so I was in the R&D areas. So you see science fiction type of things. And then you venture to the infrastructure and you see like Stone Age type of mentality and technologies. And then you say something is wrong here. So we started Ayyeka with a close friend of mine, my partner, about 5 years ago. And we said, let's bring digital technologies, what we know as digital type of technologies, cyber communication, data, AI, those type of things, into the most underserved business, which is hard infrastructure. It's water and wastewater, it's energy, it's transportation, all of those big, beautiful things you see in the outdoors, which are currently not digital. So this is the story of Ayyeka.
Well, can you give us actually one of the things I was going to ask about were some of the challenges, but you kind of got there. So you talk about kind of this industry living in the Stone Age. Do you have some examples of where they're so far behind in certain industries?
Yes, it's not about far behind, it's about adoption of technologies, because they are when you say hardware, by the way, they really mean hardware. There is no electricity in most of the things they are building. So think about water pipes, collection networks, steam distribution networks. All of those things are very, very mechanical by definition, a bridge, a tunnel.
Right.
And embedding digital solution into them, you should ask yourself why. There was a big question why to do it, because it's working, right? The tunnel's been there for years. The bridges, the collection system for hundreds of years. And then so the first is why. The second is how. Meaning once you understand you need to do it, is how to do it, because it's complicated to embed digital solution into existing infrastructure. And the third stage is what do you do with it? So assuming you know what you want to do and how to do it, then how you really implement it, because there is also like a human factor into it. It's not like embedding the infrastructure, it's making the infrastructure stakeholder use it. So they're not in the Stone Age, but they are relying on, let's call it, existing frameworks for operation, meaning they used to do a lot of things manually for numerous reasons. And it's not good or bad. This is how they do it. They do a lot of visual inspection. They do in field work. It's a lot of this type of mentality.
Right.
So they used to do a lot of things by driving to the site, collect what they see, take notes, and going back to their office in the evening. And we believe that things should be different. Like we're running almost every aspect of our day-to-day life, personal activity digitally. We track our health right through the apps or through the Fitbits, and we track our financial activity, the banks. We track our diets. We track everything. Our habits on Netflix are being tracked, and screen time. But it seems that what is very natural for us on the consumer base, it's very uncommon in the infrastructure. And there was an idea that IoT, Internet of Things, in the industrial scope will bring solution to the infrastructure. And we found this is not the case, because what works in a factory, again, doesn't work in the infrastructure. So here come infrastructure 4.0, the next generation.
So part of the problem, right, is you have infrastructure that was built over hundreds, if not, sometimes even hundreds of years, right? Well, I shouldn't say that, but you get my point. Like, so you have infrastructure that's been being built for hundreds of years, and there's still, pipes that have been laying in the ground for probably 100 years. So how do you go about digitizing or getting that information, right, from such old infrastructure?
Right.
Yeah. So you touch a very true point in this story, and this is one of the things that are unique for infrastructure. It's very hard to create a data, meaning in every IoT scheme or every IoT project, you need to have 3 steps. It's always the same 3 steps, and it should be this 1, 2, 3, but it's not. So the first step is to create data. The second step is to consolidate it in a proper manner, digital manner. And the third step is typically to analyze, or we call it utilize the data. So in infrastructure, the hardest step is the first one, to get the data. to literally create a data, and you need to add to existing infrastructure. As I said, it can be a manhole that is 70 years old, in the Midwest, a manhole that is still built with bricks, or even older than that. You need to add instrumentation, sensors, communication, cybersecurity measures. This is part of Ayyeka. We started very, very early on because we understood that the first hard step that we need to tackle will be the data creation. And we built our technology around it. So like plug and play, fully autonomous, very resilient to harsh environments like underground installation, etc. Very modular. It was a very, very challenging first few years for us to get this data creation part up and running. And now, and it's been demonstrated all over the US, we can literally make every asset out there more and more intelligent. And more company follows, meaning we are not the only one who's in the game. There are more companies that follows because we believe also the market is huge and full of potential. There are so many old infrastructure out there that is desperately need to be digitized.
I mean, obviously it seems like one of the first steps was just getting the sensors into where you needed to get them, right? I mean, we see projects going on like this all the time, even with modern, like electric, they're saying they're replacing meters or water, to get those sensors there. So how complicated was that part of it? How long did that take before you could even start collecting data, right? Because you have to have so many sensors installed in so many types of utilities before you could start going, okay, let's start making sense of everything we're seeing here.
Yeah. So sensor is it's the first thing to understand that the majority of the current sensors are not designed for infrastructure. They are designed for industrial automation. So factories, plants, those type of things. And you try to install them in the great outdoor infrastructure, you find that they are not designed either to the harsh environment or to the lack of maintenance or to the lack of power supply. One of those things is missing typically. So you can only use a very, very narrow selection of sensors. We have good relation with some of the leading sensor companies. We came to them a few years ago and we said, these are requirements. We need low power, fast wake-up time, intelligent, etc. So some of them develop a product line that fit our needs. So it enables us an edge over existing sensors. We also know how to take sensors and understand if they can do what we want them to do, and B, make it work. But power supply is a major problem there, meaning you need to find sensors that are power efficient. And second is reliability, because you want to install sensors in places that they need to withstand, 2 or 3 years submerged, for example, in very harsh wastewater collection systems. So longevity of the sensors and power supply are major challenges, but more and more companies are building into it. The IoT is reaching those areas as well.
What do you think has been the most significant advancement in these sensors? Not that you've personally worked with the company, but in general in the industry, where was the big jump, you think?
I don't think it's there yet. I don't think we are in the big jump part of the sensors, because the majority of their business is in the industrial automation. So they're not very passionate about creating sensor for infrastructure. I think that what they are starting to understand that there is a real need, meaning there is a real market behind it. So they are moving more and more toward, let's call it affordable sensors and maintenance-free sensors. Meaning they are working very hard on creating a sensor that will require less maintenance. I mean, like calibration and cleaning, typically.
Right.
But we are not there yet, or at least not at the scope that we would like them to be.
So you consider that something that engineers should be thinking about as they're designing right now?
For sure, and I know they are thinking about it, but the cycle takes time, because in all the hardware space, which people typically neglect it in common day-to-day things, there is a lot of regulation. So you need to certify everything. So certification cycle takes time. Right. Especially if you're working in hazardous locations such as gas and oil and gas and explosive environment in wastewater facilities. So you need to have a very heavy certification process. And also a lot of the sensor companies understand now that the sensor itself is not the solution. It's a component in a smart edge device or in a smart edge solution, and then the data goes up. So a lot of them either team up with companies as Ayyeka, meaning they bring a solution together, or they develop their own IoT skill set inside to make their sensors smarter and smarter.
So where do you think the need is the most in the infrastructure space? What do you think, which part would benefit the most from smartening up?
Or which industry, right?
Which industry,
transportation, Water, waste, electric,
Yeah.
So I think it's not a straightforward question because there are many things into it. Okay, I will explain maybe differently. Infrastructure is diverse and it's different. For example, the California infrastructure and the upstate New York infrastructure, they both serve water and energy, but in different manners. So the infrastructure is not a unified industry. You have the segments, so you have water and wastewater and collection networks and etc. And B, you have different roles for those networks in different parts of the country or in different parts of the world. So this is the first thing. Second, it's very political business, meaning, for example, now in the US, I think that water is one of the most agreed upon topics between, the different parties and entities. Everyone agrees that you need to fix the water infrastructure. And you see the drought.
And you found it, Ariel. You found it.
Yeah. By the way, in the industry, you will see that energy is not something there is no consensus about energy or about transportation. Some people like trains, some people like high-speed trains, some people like big roads, and some people say public transportation. So, but water is one of the things that can benefit the most because it's out of the infrastructure. It's a very, maybe it's the wrong word, but I will use neglected industry. So not too much budget was put into water and wastewater. B, it's very segregated, meaning there is not like major utilities. You have like very, very many small utilities all over the place.
Yeah.
Very, very 50,000 of them in the US. 50,000 small utilities in the US, or 50,000 utilities in total. Out of them, probably 95% are small. And this is also the thing that you cannot really live without it. So think about it. Water is the first thing that you're in crisis. You remember the Houston case, the frost, and before that the hurricane in Houston. The first damage the infrastructure was the drinking water. The treatment plants was shut off, etc. So this is the first immediate response of emergency services to bring drinking water to people because they cannot survive without the water or the wastewater to collect it. So this is our gut feeling, and this is also our focus in Ayyeka. We believe that water and wastewater should spearhead the digital transformation for infrastructure 4.0. This is a very big opportunity for us and them to make this leap forward.
And that makes it even more complicated, right? Because now you're talking about, a utility in most places that's buried pretty deep underground also, right? So, whether it's wastewater or whether it's water, right? They're buried underground, feeding all these homes and these areas. So and I know there's monitoring at the plants, but there's also monitoring, at sort of like that street level or in that locale. So how do you guys go about getting enough data? Do you know what I mean, for a given region? To sort of, like I said, make some assumptions on here's what needs to change, or here's what we're seeing in patterns.
No, you are 100% correct, because most of the current data is from the plants, the treatment plant, the desalination plant, etc. So what they call the linear infrastructure, the linear infrastructure, which are the pipes, the collection system, the power lines. This is called linear infrastructure. This is the part of the infrastructure that is less connected to the digital world. And this is where we play our game, or we play our business in. And the question, how much data is enough, is a good question, because again, there is no straight answer, because first you need to understand or decide what you want to solve, which problem you want to solve, because different type of data require different type of data sets. And second, you need to prioritize it. But it's exactly like your personal life, right? Meaning someone who's training for a very, very, let's say, Ironman, will require different type of tracking than that a guy like me that jog once every few weeks, because we have different goals, right? I have a specific goal. The other person has a specific goals. We both may wear our Apple watches and use the health application, but we use it differently. And so same with the utilities. When we have a say in Ayyeka that like all happy utilities are the same, but every said utility is said in a different way. Because each one of them have different problems. In the Southwest, they have the drought. In the Midwest, they have the floods. In the Northeast, they have the cold weather, meaning the snow. Every utility is a bit different. They all share the common problems, meaning aging workforce, aging infrastructure, compliance of regulation, operational stresses that are going over the roof, cybersecurity threats. They all share the same common problems, but they use the solution a bit differently.
All right, so here's a hot topic. What about cybersecurity? So I understand you specialize in some of this as well in the cyberspace. Now, where does this play into some of the work that you do at Ayyeka?
So when we started Ayyeka, as I said, I have a co-founder and a good friend of mine. He's the technology guy in the company. He comes from, his background is also defense, but he comes from the cyber forces. He did some offensive, some defensive type of cyber. And when we started Ayyeka, he said, Ariel, Ayyeka need to be protected. And it was like 2014-ish type of thing. I said, why? It costs too much money to do it, and we are not prepared, etc. He said, listen, Ariel, we need to spearhead or to be the outlier. We need to be the well-protected. And A, now every morning I wake up and say, Yair, this is his name, you're right. And B, because the story of cyber is becoming a hot potato. And one, for two reasons, by the way. One of them is just criminal activity. People or hackers understood that critical infrastructure will pay. Meaning, if you're looking for a lucrative something, you will hijack a plant or a utility and you will just blackmail them. So it's purely financial thing. And the other thing is, let's call it national threat, meaning it's on top of, let's call it, offensive activities on the front line, meaning disturbing critical infrastructure is a very good leverage for both sides of the fighting. And in critical infrastructure specifically, A, they are late, way behind, a lot of other businesses such as financing and things like that. But B, they are only as strong as their weakest link. And in our case, the weakest link is those linear assets, because you install monitoring or communication devices in the underground manholes. So you have no physical protection on the assets, meaning you cannot really lock the manholes, right? There are hundreds of them in every city or thousands that are being monitored. So no physical protection for the hardware. And then, so your only option to protect yourself is through the communication. And I think that Ayyeka currently is one of the only companies in this domain that is emphasizing cybersecurity of every part of the solution. And we also try to educate our customers and stakeholders that we work with that it's just a matter of time. If you will not protect properly your digital infrastructure, you will be attacked. It's just a matter of time and statistics. And when you will be attacked, you will have either a visible attack, so you will just need to pay to get them off, or you will have an invisible attacker that will just wait for the right moment to switch on the attack, and which is very bad for them. And so in Ayyeka, we invest a lot of technical resources, and there is a lot of effort in the technical or the technology space how to protect properly those dispersed networks. But we are there, and I think that currently we are considered the most protected or the most cyber secured solution in the market, and for a good reason. My partner was on the other side, let's say, of the table in those type of projects, so we know exactly how the other side think and act. So we took the extra mile, or we made the extra mile to protect ourselves properly and help our partners, colleagues, whoever wants to talk with us about cybersecurity.
So what is your advice then for, we're talking about EEs, and I'd love for you to leave them with some advice as they go forth and they are designing and they're out there in the midst of all this. What do you leave them with in terms of the industry and where it's going?
It's simple. People are a bit concerned because it's using a 3-letter acronym. So the answer is use TLS. TLS is the protocol, the same as the internet, the lock on the browser. When you browse to a website, you have a small lock on it. This is mean that the communication between your computer and the other side is TLS protected. So if you use TLS, you are almost there. So it's one sentence. Just remember to use TLS protocol for communication. People doesn't find themselves affiliated with it because TLS is a 3-letter acronym, right? Meaning, so it's a dirty technical word. But TLS is the one thing that you need to consider when you connect two digital things like your browser and the server, or your communication device and the SCADA system, another 4-letter acronym in this case. Make sure that you use TLS. This is one advice, a golden advice.
Well, thank you, Ariel. We do appreciate that. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave us with today? And please as well tell us where we can learn more about you and Ayyeka.
So yes, so it will be beneficial, I think, on the grand scale of things, that people will start to think about infrastructure as a day-to-day necessity. But the majority of people doesn't understand infrastructure. But people who are into infrastructure should think about infrastructure as a necessity, as a critical. This is the reason it's called critical infrastructure. And second, understand that to move to the next phase, we call it, or not we, but it's being called infrastructure 4.0 because it's the industrial revolution into critical infrastructure. It's a must. It's not like a nice to have. It's not like something that you read on books or on posts. It's something you need to do on a daily basis, on small and big alike. And we are working with some entities in Washington about delivering this message across the board, meaning it shouldn't be like let's call the one-man ID in some remote utility. It should be something that is strategically important to the, let's call it, to every level of government, meaning all the way from the federal level all the way down to the local level of government, to make their infrastructure resilient. And it's not only cyber, it's cyber resilient for sure, but resilient for the bigger frame, because we do need those infrastructure for the upcoming 100 years. You need to drink, you need to power, you need to provide wastewater services. And Ayyeka, we are spearheading this type of journey. So you can find a lot of information on our website. We also have references there for a trade show, for publication, for articles. And anyone who wants to join this type of movement, Infrastructure 4.0, we are more than welcome to cooperate. Meaning if it's regulators, if it's commercial entities, if it's end users that want to create awareness in their local city for those type of activity, our door is always open.
Thank you, Ariel. We appreciate that.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.